title of the bill. Then, as majority leader, Harry went through the parliamentary procedure. He said, "Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered as read." Had Senator Hayworth been there, 4 words would have been uttered: "Mr. President, I object." And within the rules of the Senate, the clerk would have started to read. And he would have read and read and read some more, all 2,800 pages. And now we know in the fullness of time, that Rahm Emanuel, that noted locker room lobbyist, was in Harry Reid's office writing the bill before it was even, while it was being debated on the floor. Now just imagine in your mind's eye. The clerk is reading the bill and he comes to a section devoid of verbiage. Section 233, blank. C-SPAN 2, gavel-to-gavel coverages. Even the leftist networks would have had no choice but to cover it. It was news, and we could have defeated it right there. But the problem is, the Senate is thought of as a club, and people are genteel. And of course, the reporters in Washington were standing in front of the White House. President Obama and family have delayed their Hawaiian Christmas vacation. And so here's what Senate Republicans decided. Well, they've got the votes anyway. It's Christmas time. We want to go home too. We'll let them pass it. But then when we come back, we'll make them vote on a higher debt ceiling. Excuse me? That's political leverage? Given the spending culture of the Democrats? Ladies and gentlemen, say what you will about me, and I know much has been said already. Much has been written already. Whatever my faults, foibles, real or imagined, I understand full well the Arizona Republic, the New York Times, and the Washington Post will lampoon me mercilessly and disagree with me virulently on their editorial pages, and given the current state of journalism, on what passes for their news pages. That's fine. I don't go there to represent them. I go there to represent you. The fight should have been joined then to stop Obamacare, but here we are on the backside of it, and now it's repealed. And my opponent has come home, and what has he said? Quote, "We're going to fight, fight, fight to repeal Obamacare." Oh, really? The bill for repeal has been introduced. My former congressional colleague, Jim DeMint of South Carolina, introduced it, along with 15 original co-sponsors. John McCain was not among them. You as a citizen, me as a candidate for office, those serving now in the House and the Senate can go to a website, repealitnow.org. You can sign a petition demanding the repeal. Those of us who are candidates for public office can sign a pledge saying we will fight for repeal. Senator McCain has not signed the pledge. John's a good man, but there is a gulf between Mr. McCain's campaign rhetoric and the reality of his record. That is what we must understand. Joy.
JD, the whole budget issue has got me absolutely, my blood boiling, and I know everybody in the room. Everything you've said so far rings really true, and I appreciate everything you've been telling us. I haven't done my homework on this next question, but I'm curious. Are we required by some treaty or some law to pay dues to the United Nations, to send aid to to countries that hate us? Could we not use that money and more to help reduce our current debt?
Joy, you have demonstrated again why all knowledge and wisdom does not reside within the beltway around Washington, D.C. You're making the perfect point. In these austere times, we have to be selective with foreign aid. There is nothing wrong with enlightened self-interest, helping those who support you and resisting those who oppose you, should you decide to have foreign aid at all. But there's another thing. And look, it's not going to be popular. And it's a good reason why there are 6-year terms in the United States Senate. What I'm going to have to do as your next senator is not going to be popular, because we're going to have to cut discretionary spending, and I'm going to have to get together with guys like Paul Ryan, who started working on entitlement reform. Paul and I served together on the Ways and Means Committee. I've taken a look at what he's written. I don't know that I buy it all, but we're going to have to start to work for my generation. I was born in 1958. More American men were born in that year than any other in our history. You know, we didn't even have to register for selective service. To different generations fall different responsibilities. Many of you fought our wars. My generation must mind the store. We must come back and understand, look, our retirement age has already been raised. A lot of people don't realize that, but that came out of the Reagan-O'Neill Social Security compact back in the early 80s. Our retirement now is around 70. It's probably going to go higher. Why? Demographically, we're living longer. I'm talking about my generation, not people on the cusp of retirement, but for those of us at the apogee of the baby boom. And I don't view that as any type of erosion of my freedom, because we have rights here. And we should dwell on the rights and the opportunities instead of being enslaved by the culture of entitlement. And we must make those changes if we are to survive. One closing note, you've been generous with your time, lest you feel that I have been somehow highly partisan. Well, maybe you're right. But I'll close with a wonderful story from a Democrat. We can learn from this. It was the aforementioned Tip O'Neill. The old House Speaker, before his passing, he wrote a book entitled All Politics is Personal. Or pardon me, All Politics is Local. I believe all politics is personal. But anyway, Freudian slip, I retitled his book. Sounds like I've got a new one in the works, doesn't it? At any rate, the story goes, Tip was making his first run for public office. If memory serves, I believe it was for the Massachusetts State House. He and Millie had not even married yet. He was still at home with his folks. And there was a lady across the street who he'd known since he was a little kid. I can't remember her name, but that being Boston, and this being my story, you know when you go to the movies and they say, based on a true story, stick with me. We're going to call her Mrs. McGillicuddy. And every day Tip would come out of the house, he'd see his neighbor, hiya, Miss McGillicuddy. Oh, hiya, Tip. And he'd go out and campaign. Well, fast forward to the day before the Democrat primary. Tip has gone out and shaken every hand, showed up at every union hall, gone by a pub or two, and he's coming up the hill. He was a big guy even then, so he's kind of dragging. And he looks across the street, and who does he see but Mrs. McGillicuddy sweeping off her porch? So he summons up all that boisterous bonhomie that candidates have to have, and he shouts out to her, hiya, Miss McGillicuddy, say, big day tomorrow. And a troubled look comes to her face, and she says, Thomas P. O'Neill, come here. Well, what is it, Miss McGillicuddy? What can I do for you? Tip, I just thought you ought to know I'm not going to be voting for you tomorrow. Not voting for me? Well, Miss McGillicuddy, we agree on the major issues of the day. You know me all my life. Why would I want you to be voting for me? Because, Tip, you did not ask me to vote for you. That's why I'm not voting for you tomorrow. Fellow Republicans, who says we can't learn a couple of things from the Democrats? So lest there be any confusion, I earnestly and humbly request your vote for the United States Senate in the Republican primary August 24th and following victory there in the general election November 2nd. Let's go on to victory. Have a consistent conservative in the U.S. Senate. God bless you. Thank you for your time, and God bless the United States of America.
Now, aren't you glad you came out to hear J.D. today? Thank you so much for making the trip up here.